When you love someone who's avoidant, you often find yourself standing in a strange emotional space, a place that feels both close and far at the same time. There are moments when you feel completely connected to them. You see the softness in their eyes, the quiet ways they show care, the unspoken warmth that passes between you. And then without warning they pull back. The air changes. The silence stretches longer. You wonder what happened, what you did, or what they're thinking. It's confusing, isn't it? Because in those moments it feels like they've disappeared, even if they're sitting right next to you. But here's the truth that many people miss. Avoidant people can love you deeply. They just love differently. They love in ways that are often hidden behind distance, hesitation, and quiet. They love with fear and restraint, with a heart that's been taught to protect itself before it reaches for connection. And when they finally do let love in, even a little, you might not see it right away. Their love doesn't always come wrapped in words or affection. It comes in small, easily overlooked gestures and quiet loyalty. In the subtle ways they stay, even when their instinct is to run. If you've ever been with someone like that, this conversation is for you. Because to understand an avoidant is to learn a completely different emotional language, one built not on constant expression but on subtle presence, not on grand romantic gestures but on restraint. And to really see their love, you have to slow down and learn how to listen between the silences. Let's start by grounding this in something human. A story. There's a woman named Maya. She's been seeing a man named Daniel for about 8 months. When things are good, they're really good. They laugh together. They share quiet dinners at home. He listens to her in a way that feels grounding, like he's actually there, not just waiting to speak. But sometimes Maya feels a sudden shift. Maybe she brings up something emotional, like missing him when he's quiet for a few days. Or maybe she reaches for a deeper kind of connection. Where do you see this going? And she watches as his energy changes. He doesn't get angry. He just withdraws. He gets quiet. His texts slow down. He says he's been busy, that he's just tired, that he needs space. And Maya starts to spiral. Did she push too hard? Is he losing interest? Was she wrong to bring it up? But a few days later, he's back, like nothing happened. He's present again, kind, even affectionate in his own quiet way. And the pattern repeats. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. Now, here's what's really happening beneath the surface. An avoidant person, someone with an avoidant attachment style, has learned, somewhere early in life, that closeness can be unsafe. Maybe they grew up with parents who weren't emotionally available, who discouraged too much affection, or who rewarded independence instead of vulnerability. So they built an internal rule that says, if I rely on someone emotionally, I could get hurt. If I let people in too far, I could lose myself. And now, as adults, that rule still runs quietly in the background. It's not that they don't want love. They crave it deeply. But the moment they start to feel it, their nervous system registers it as a kind of danger. Their instinct says, pull back before you get consumed. And so, they do. They take space. They retreat into themselves. They detach not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels overwhelming, even threatening. That's the paradox of avoidant love. They want connection, but they fear it just as much. But here's the hopeful part, and it's why you're listening today. When an avoidant person truly loves you, their love has to fight through that fear. Every small step toward closeness, every time they choose to stay instead of running, is a victory over years of emotional conditioning. When they reach for your hand without overthinking it. When they call you after an argument instead of disappearing. When they start sharing small parts of their inner world, their thoughts, their stories, their quiet moments. That's love in progress. It may not look like what you're used to. It may not sound like I love you every day, but it's love all the same. And understanding that difference, seeing those moments for what they truly are, can completely change how you experience them. Before we go deeper, I want you to take a breath. Because if you've been loving an avoidant, you've probably spent a lot of time feeling unseen. Maybe you've questioned your worth. Maybe you've wondered why their affection feels so conditional. Maybe you've tried to decode every message, every pause, every sigh. But it's not that they don't care. It's that caring, openly, consistently, vulnerably, goes against the wiring they've lived with for years. And the fact that they're even trying, that's enormous. Now let's get clear on something important. Understanding avoidant behavior doesn't mean excusing hurtful actions. It doesn't mean tolerating neglect, emotional coldness, or disrespect. What it does mean is recognizing that avoidant people have their own emotional logic, one that operates differently from what most of us expect. You can love an avoidant without losing yourself if you learn to see what love looks like through their lens. And that's exactly what this episode is about. Over the next few sections, we'll explore what avoidant love really looks like. We'll look at the things they do that might seem confusing, and unpack what those gestures actually mean. Because when an avoidant truly lets you in, that love may not be loud, but it's deeply real. Before we end this first part, I want to tell you another small story. A man named Leo once described his relationship with his girlfriend like this. He said, "I never realized how much I was avoiding her until I started missing her silence. She had stopped chasing him for attention. She stopped trying to make him open up on her timeline. She just started being there, calm, grounded, consistent. And over time, something shifted in him. He said, when I realized she wasn't going to demand closeness from me, I started wanting to give it freely." That's the paradox of the avoidant heart. When love feels like pressure, they run. When love feels like space, they grow toward it. So as we move into part 2, where we'll start exploring the first real sign of avoidant love, I want you to keep this in mind. Avoidants don't fall in love despite their distance. They fall in love through it. Their love story isn't about fireworks or instant emotional openness. It's about learning to stay, slowly, intentionally, against every instinct that tells them not to. And that's where we'll begin next. What it really means when an avoidant shows up, even in the smallest ways. Subtle consistency. When they show up in small but meaningful ways. When you think about love, you might picture words, grand gestures, long hugs, and constant affection. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, love often speaks in smaller, quieter ways. Ways that are easy to miss if you're not looking closely. You see, for an avoidant, consistency is courage. Because consistency means showing up, and showing up means risking connection. And connection, to them, feels like the one thing that could make them lose control. Think about this. You send them a text, maybe just something simple. Good morning. You're not expecting much, maybe a morning or an emoji in return. But when they actually reply, even briefly, what you might not realize is that this tiny act costs them emotional energy. For them, it's not just a text. It's a small step into emotional engagement. You might think it's just a message. But for someone whose instinct is to protect their emotional independence, that small message might represent an inner negotiation. A voice inside that says, "It's okay. You can connect. You're safe here." Avoidants don't always show consistency through frequency. They show it through choice. Every time they choose to stay in touch, to share a moment, to keep the thread alive, and even after pulling away, that's a quiet declaration of love. They might not always say, "I miss you," but they'll find small ways to stay present in your life. They'll send you a meme they think you'll laugh at. They'll check in after a long day. They'll ask how you slept, how work went, or if you ate. And for them, those aren't casual check-ins, those are bridges. Let me paint you a small scene. Imagine a woman named Ava. She's been dating Liam for a while. Liam is classic avoidant, independent, calm, keeps his feelings close to his chest. He's not the type to send long good morning texts or post couple photos. In fact, early on, Ava sometimes wondered if he even liked her that much. But one week, when Ava was going through a rough time, her grandmother passed away, she noticed something. Liam didn't overwhelm her with emotional talk or try to fix it. He didn't say much at all. Instead, he started showing up quietly. He'd drop off coffee before work. He'd check in every night, not with "How are you feeling?" but with "Did you manage to eat dinner tonight?" And when she cried one evening, he didn't say anything. He just sat beside her, no words, no advice. Just presence. To Ava, it seemed understated. But for Liam, that was an enormous emotional leap. choosing to stay close when someone he loves is in pain. That's the thing about avoidance. When they love you, they start to resist their own instinct to retreat. They begin to show up in ways that may look small from the outside, but represent something monumental within. You might be used to thinking love looks like constant togetherness, long conversations, daily calls, endless texts. But an avoidance love rhythm is different. For them, connection can feel like a wave. They move close, then retreat, then close again. The key isn't how often they come close, but that they keep coming back. Every time they return after taking space, it's a sign of trust. Because to an avoidant, coming back means something like, I needed to breathe. I needed to feel safe again. But I still want this. I still want you. It's not rejection. It's regulation. When they care about you, they start to shorten that distance. Maybe they take space for a day instead of a week, or they check in sooner after a fight. That's progress. That's love in motion. Here's what's fascinating about avoidant love. They often express it through dependability, not emotional intensity. They might not gush about their feelings, but they'll remember what you need. They'll pick up the thing you mentioned in passing. They'll quietly make sure the car is filled with gas before a long drive. They'll fix the shelf that's been loose for weeks, and you might not realize, this is how they say, I love you. Because for them, action feels safer than words. Words make them vulnerable. Actions let them love without losing control. If you listen to someone with an avoidant attachment long enough, you'll notice something subtle. They don't talk much about love, but they often demonstrate loyalty. They show up when you're sick. They'll help you move, take care of something you mentioned once, check on you even when they're emotionally distant. And the reason these moments matter is because they're voluntary. Avoidants don't perform affection to impress others. They do it only when it feels authentic. And that means when they do, it's real. So if you notice an avoidant quietly building reliability, don't underestimate it. They're telling you, you're part of my world now, even when I don't say it out loud. Let's look at another small story. There's a man named Ryan, his partner. Clara is expressive. She loves affection. Words closeness. Ryan, on the other hand, needs solitude. When Clara talks about her feelings, he listens, but sometimes he drifts off, lost in thought. One weekend, Clara felt hurt. She said, I don't feel like you care lately. Ryan didn't know what to say. He just froze. The conversation ended awkwardly, and she went home frustrated. 2 days later, Ryan showed up at her door with her favorite takeout. He didn't apologize in words, but he stood there quietly and said, Can we watch something together? For Clara, it might not have felt like much, but for Ryan, that was his apology, his love, and his effort, all rolled into one. When avoidants love you, they often act first and speak second. Consistency for them isn't about being there all the time. It's about choosing to be there. Again and again, despite discomfort. That's how they build emotional trust. Slowly, in micro moments of connection that accumulate over time. And here's the truth. Those moments do add up, because avoidants are always measuring one thing deep inside. Is it safe to stay close? And each small act of showing up, every message, every visit, every effort, is their way of answering that question with yes. Now, if you're someone who loves an avoidant, this can be confusing. You might crave more. You might want more words, more affection, more openness. And it's okay to want those things, that's human. But one of the biggest shifts you can make is learning to see the love they're already giving you, instead of only noticing what's missing. Because when you recognize and appreciate their effort, it helps them feel safe enough to give more. Avoidants grow in love through safety and space, not pressure or demand. When they feel accepted for how they love, they begin to soften. They start to open more willingly, to reach out more freely. So sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply acknowledge the small steps. Say, I noticed you made time for me this week. Thank you. Or, it means a lot that you showed up. Even when I knew you needed space. That kind of recognition goes straight to their nervous system. It tells them love doesn't have to feel unsafe. If you take nothing else from this part, take this. When an avoidant person loves you, They don't promise consistency through words. They prove it through choice. And those choices, those small, steady gestures, might just be the truest form of devotion they know how to give. In the next part, we'll move into something a little deeper. Once an avoidant starts to trust you, they begin to let you into their private world, the part of themselves that very few people get to see. That's where love starts to grow roots. It's no longer just about consistency. It becomes about intimacy, trust, and shared space. And for an avoidant, that's one of the hardest and most beautiful steps of all. When they let you into their private world, when you love someone who's avoidant, it can often feel like you're standing at the edge of a high wall, a wall you can see over, but not quite through. You know there's something beautiful on the other side, a softness, a depth, a tenderness that shows itself in flashes, but you can't always reach it. That's because avoidants don't just guard their hearts. They guard their worlds, their home, their routines, their inner thoughts. These are sacred spaces, and letting someone in means surrendering control over the one thing they trust most, themselves. So when an avoidant begins to open that door, even just a little, it's not casual. It's not convenient. It's trust. And in the language of the avoidant heart, trust is another word for love. Avoidant people live their lives with invisible boundaries most of the time. They have lines drawn around their space, physical, emotional, even conversational lines, and they don't cross them easily. So when they invite you in, and when they share something real, or show you who they are outside of their calm, composed surface, that's one of the most intimate things they can do. They might start small. Maybe they invite you into their home for the first time, a place that's been their fortress. Maybe they cook for you, or show you the playlist they listen to when they're alone. Maybe they tell you about a memory that shaped them, not in a way that demands pity, but simply to be understood. That's them saying, "You're safe here. You can see the parts of me I usually hide. Let's bring this to life." There's a woman named Rachel. She's dating Noah, thoughtful, quiet, steady. When they first started seeing each other, Noah always insisted on meeting her out somewhere. Restaurants, walks, his favorite cafe. He never invited her to his apartment, even after months. Not because he didn't want her there, but because that space represented something private. His comfort, his control, his independence. Rachel sometimes wondered if that distance meant he wasn't serious. But one weekend he called her and said, "I made something. You should come by." When she arrived, his apartment was simple but carefully arranged. Books lined up neatly, the faint smell of coffee, soft music playing. He handed her a small painting he'd done, a landscape from his hometown. He said, "I don't really show people this. It's just something I do when I need quiet." It wasn't a grand confession. He didn't say, "I love you." But that moment, that invitation, was his version of it. Because what he gave her wasn't just access to his space. He gave her access to his inner world. For avoidants, their private world is where they feel safe, where they can think, recharge, and regulate. It's not that they don't want to share it. It's that sharing it feels vulnerable, almost like handing over their shield. They've spent years building emotional self-sufficiency. They take pride in it. It keeps them safe. So when they start making room for you, not just physically but emotionally, that means something profound. You're no longer seen as a threat to their autonomy. You're seen as someone who brings peace instead of pressure. You'll notice this in quiet ways. They might start telling you about their day, not just the surface-level stuff, but how they felt. They might mention a childhood story or an insecurity, or a moment they regret. They might start using the word "we," as in "we should go there," or "we could do that sometime." For an avoidant, those little moments are huge, because they mean their mind has started to include you in their internal world, their plans, their future, their private thoughts. But here's the key. You can't force your way into that space. The more you push, the higher their walls rise. An avoidant opens up only when they feel emotionally safe, when they trust that being known won't mean being controlled. If you try to pry, if you rush, if you ask, "Why don't you ever talk to me about your feelings?" they'll shut down even more. It's not because they don't want to share. It's because they can feel the demand, and demand feels like danger. The only way is through patience and calm curiosity. When they start to open a door, don't rush in. Just stay there, steady, present. That's how you build intimacy with someone who's afraid of being consumed by it. There's another small story that illustrates this. A man named Jordan had always been the strong, quiet type. He rarely talked about his family, never about his childhood. His girlfriend Lena had learned not to ask too much. One night they were driving home late. The car was quiet, the world outside dark and soft. Out of nowhere he said, "My dad used to drive like this, late at night. He'd turn the radio down when he wanted to think, then silence again." But to Lena, that single line felt like a door cracking open. She didn't push for more. She just said, "I like that image." And in that moment, something softened in him, because she didn't demand more. She just received what he offered. That's how you make space for an avoidance love to grow. Letting someone into their world isn't just about sharing stories or space. It's also about allowing you to see their beast. Avoidants spend much of their lives managing impressions, appearing competent, in control, emotionally steady. But when they start to relax around you, you'll see it. They'll let you see them tired, frustrated, unfiltered. They'll stop worrying about how they appear and just be. And that's love. Not because they're perfect in those moments, but because they're real. There's a point in every relationship with an avoidant person when they face an internal crossroad. Do I stay behind my walls, or do I take the risk of being seen? When they choose the second, when they start to open up their routines, their homes, their emotions, that's the moment they stop just being with you and start being known by you. That's where love becomes something deeper than attraction or companionship. That's where it becomes trust. And here's something beautiful to remember. Once an avoidant lets you into their private world, they don't do it lightly. They rarely give that space to anyone. So if you've reached that point, if they invite you in, if they share, if they show you their quieter truths, you've become someone sacred to them. Even if they don't say it, that's their heart saying, "I see you. I trust you. You're part of my safe space now." As you love them through this process, remember, you're not there to fix them or pull them open faster. You're there to meet them where they are, with presence, calm, and authenticity. Because avoidants don't open through confrontation. They open through safety. When love feels like freedom instead of pressure, they start to expand toward it naturally, like a flower turning toward the sun, not because it's told to, but because it finally feels the warmth. So if you're with an avoidant who's beginning to share small pieces of themselves, who invites you in, who starts to let you see behind the mask, pay attention. That's not hesitation. That's progress. That's what love looks like for them. And it might just be one of the most genuine forms of intimacy there is. Two people, both learning how to be seen, one slowly lowering their guard, and the other learning how to love without rushing. In the next part, we'll look at what happens after this, when love deepens enough that an avoidant begins to challenge their biggest struggle, communication, because once they trust you enough to let you in, the next battle they face is learning how to stay connected, even when things get uncomfortable. And that's where real emotional growth and real love begins. Communication, protection, and emotional effort. When you love someone who's avoidant, you'll notice something curious about how they communicate. It's not that they don't want to talk. It's that they've learned that talking often leads to conflict, misunderstanding, or pain. For most of their life, silence has been their safest language. But here's the beautiful thing. When an avoidant person truly loves you, they'll start fighting against their own silence. Not in big dramatic ways, but in small, intentional moments where they choose to stay, to speak, to explain instead of disappearing. And that's huge, because for someone who spent years protecting their heart by keeping things to themselves, every word they share, every attempt to communicate instead of retreat, is an act of love. You might not notice it at first. It won't always sound like, "Let's talk about our feelings." Sometimes, it sounds like, "I just need a little time, but I don't want you to think I'm pulling away." That sentence, that small reassurance, is massive progress. That's an avoidant learning to stay connected even when they're overwhelmed. It's their version of saying, "I'm still here even if I need space." There's a story that captures this perfectly. Elena was dating Marcus. Kind, calm, and emotionally reserved. He wasn't big on long conversations about feelings. Whenever things got tense, he'd withdraw, saying he needed to clear his head. In the beginning, this drove Elena crazy. She took it personally. She'd think, why can't he just talk to me? Why does he have to shut down every time something feels off? But one evening after a small argument, he did something different. Instead of leaving or going silent, he said quietly, "I'm not good at talking when I'm upset. I need a bit of time, but I don't want you to think I'm gone. I'll come back to it once I've calmed down." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was an avoidant learning to communicate through the discomfort. And that moment changed everything. Not because it solved the problem, but because it showed effort. That's what love looks like for them. Avoidants aren't emotionless, they just struggle to express emotions in real time. When they're flooded with feelings, their nervous system screams retreat. Their brain says, if I stay, I'll say something wrong. If I leave, I can breathe again. So when they love you, what they're really learning is how to regulate with you, instead of away from you. It's not easy. It means unlearning decades of instinct. It means staying open when every cell in their body says don't. So if you ever hear them say, "I'm trying," believe them. Because for an avoidant, trying is not just a word, it's bravery. Here's what you might start to notice as love deepens. They begin to text you back sooner, not out of obligation, but because they want to stay connected. They start clarifying misunderstandings instead of assuming distance is safer. They might even apologize, not in the defensive, half-hearted way, but with real reflection. "I know I shut down earlier. I didn't mean to push you away." That's emotional progress. That's intimacy for them. Because in their internal world, those moments feel like standing in front of a storm. The storm of emotion they've always avoided, and deciding not to run. Communication, for the avoidant, is not just about words. It's about protection. When they love you, they want to protect you, not just physically, but emotionally. They don't want to see you hurt, especially because of them, so sometimes their silence comes from fear. If I talk about this, I might say something wrong. If I show too much, I might scare them away. But love changes that. Love makes them realize that silence can hurt too, that withholding can wound just as deeply as harsh words. So they start to take small risks. They start saying things like, "I'm not sure how to explain this. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I'm trying to understand it. Can you give me a little time, but stay close?" These are the tiny, powerful bridges they build between isolation and connection. And here's something crucial to remember. When an avoidant starts communicating, it might sound awkward, defensive, or confusing at first. That's okay. They're not fluent in emotional language yet. They're learning it, often by trial and error. So when they say something imperfect, try to listen to the intention behind the words, not just the delivery. If you can hear the love underneath, the effort to connect, the risk they're taking, that's where growth happens. Here's another story. A woman named Priya had been with her boyfriend Caleb for a few years. He was a classic avoidant, kind-hearted but hard to reach when emotions ran high. One night she told him she felt distant, that she missed how things used to be. He froze up. His first instinct was to pull back, to shut down, to escape the discomfort. But this time, something shifted. He took a deep breath and said, "I don't always know what to do when you say things like that. I panic, but I do care. I just don't always know how to show it." And in that moment, Priya realized she didn't need perfection. She just needed honesty. That single moment of truth, raw, awkward, vulnerable, said more than a polished apology ever could. Because that's what love looks like in an avoidant language. Imperfect effort. Silent protection turning into brave communication. You see, when an avoidant starts to love you, they begin to value the connection more than the comfort of distance. And that's the turning point. They start noticing how silence affects you. They start wanting to show up better. Not because you demand it, but because they choose it. That's the kind of change that sticks. It's easy to think that love is all about openness and passion, about long talks and emotional transparency. But for someone who's avoidant, Love often looks quieter. It looks like staying in the room when things get hard. It looks like texting back even when they feel overwhelmed. It looks like apologizing even though it feels like failure. It looks like telling you they need space instead of just disappearing. Those are not small things. Those are massive leaps of courage, even if they don't look dramatic from the outside. And slowly, with time, those small efforts start to build something solid, a new kind of rhythm. You'll start to see them reach out just to check in, even when there's no problem. You'll see them sharing opinions, asking questions, making eye contact for longer than before. You'll feel the warmth of their quiet consistency. That's when you know they're no longer just protecting themselves. They're learning to protect the relationship. The most profound part of loving an avoidant person is realizing that their effort often hides beneath simplicity. They might never give grand speeches about their feelings, but if they're learning to communicate, to stay, to explain, that's them loving you in the only language that feels safe to them at first. And with patience, with time, with mutual respect, that language expands. Because every time they speak when they could have stayed silent, every time they reach out when they could have pulled away, every time they choose connection over control, they're saying, "I love you," just not with words you've heard before. In the final part of this series, we'll explore what happens after all this effort, when an avoidant starts to experience vulnerability, not as a threat, but as a gift, because that's when love finally begins to feel like home, not just for you, but for them too. Vulnerability, growth, and closing reflection vulnerability. It's the word most avoidant people fear the most, and the very thing that transforms their relationships when they finally let it in. Because when an avoidant falls in love, it's not the fireworks that change them. It's the quiet realization that being known doesn't have to mean being unsafe. You see, for much of their lives, avoidant people have learned to equate closeness with loss of control. They've been taught, by experience, by pain, by inconsistency, that love can overwhelm, that connection can suffocate, that needing someone always ends in disappointment. So they build walls. They rely on themselves. They learn to be okay alone, not because solitude always feels good, but because it feels predictable. And then one day, someone comes along who doesn't try to tear those walls down. Someone who simply stands outside them, patient and kind until the avoidant starts to realize, maybe love doesn't have to feel like losing. Maybe it can feel like peace. When that realization begins, it's subtle. They start to feel calmer around you, even in silence. They stop worrying about saying the wrong thing. They start to reach out, not because they have to, but because they want to share their day. And then one day, something shifts. They're sitting beside you, maybe not even talking. But for the first time, they feel that deep exhale, that sense of, I can be myself here. I don't have to perform. That's the moment an avoidant falls fully in love. It's not loud. It's not cinematic. It's quiet. But it's real. Let's make this real with a story. There's a man named Jonah. He spent most of his life avoiding emotional entanglement. He dated, but always kept people at a distance. Whenever things got serious, he'd find reasons to pull away. I'm busy. I'm not ready. I just need space. Then he met Mia. She didn't chase him. She didn't demand it. She was steady, honest, and patient. When he pulled back, she didn't panic. She simply said, I'm here when you're ready. At first, that confused him. Then it disarmed him, because no one had ever given him space without leaving. Over time, something strange happened. He started missing her, not because she filled his silence, but because she respected it. He began to share small things, his stress at work, the music he listened to when he couldn't sleep, a memory about his late grandfather. She listened. She didn't try to fix anything. And slowly, the distance he used to rely on for safety began to feel necessary. One night, out of nowhere, he said softly, You make me feel calm. It wasn't a grand declaration of love, but for him, it meant everything. That's what vulnerability looks like for the avoidant heart. Not spilling everything at once, but choosing to be known little by little, even when it feels unnatural. Avoidants fall in love by trusting slowly. They test love through consistency. They learn safety through presence. They grow closer not by talking about vulnerability, but by living it, one small, quiet moment at a time. And the deeper they go, the more they realize something profound. Vulnerability doesn't destroy them. It actually expands them, because when they finally let someone see behind the calm exterior, they discover that connection doesn't take away their strength, it deepens it. You'll know an avoidant has reached this stage when they start to do something very specific. They let you comfort them. That might sound simple, but it's monumental. At the start, avoidants are allergic to comfort. When they're upset, they isolate themselves. When they're hurting, they hide. They've learned that leaning on others is dangerous, that needing someone means depending on someone, and depending on someone means losing control. So when they finally let you hold them while they're tired, or talk about something painful, or simply rest their head on your shoulder, that's not weakness. That's healing. That's their heart learning a new language. I can let someone see me in my low moments and still be safe. And then comes the most beautiful part of all. They start to give vulnerability back. When they've healed enough to receive love, they begin to offer it, not just through care or consistency, but through emotional honesty. They start to say things like, "I missed you. I got scared I was losing you. I really appreciate what you did for me." Simple words, but powerful ones, especially from someone who once thought emotions were dangerous. That's how love grows for them. Slowly, quietly, authentically. Here's the truth most people miss. Avoidant people don't lack emotion. They feel deeply, sometimes even more deeply than others. What they lack is a sense of safety in expressing it. But once love gives them that safety, everything changes. They start showing affection in ways you might not expect. Acts of service, thoughtful gestures, small gifts, quality time. And sometimes when they really feel secure, they surprise you with something else entirely. Spontaneous warmth. A hug that lasts longer than usual. A look that says everything words can't. It's in those moments that you realize, this is what all the patience, all the slow work, all the gentle love was for. You've helped them build a new definition of closeness. One rooted not in fear, but in trust. There's one more story. One that feels like an ending, but also a beginning. A woman named Kayla once told me about her partner, Theo. He was the kind of man who always seemed composed. He never raised his voice, never cried, never talked about his feelings. He'd say he was fine, even when she could tell he wasn't. Over the years, she learned not to take it personally. She gave him space when he needed it. But she also stayed consistent, checking in, showing up, making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. Then one night after a long, quiet dinner, he said something he'd never said before. He said, "You know, I used to think I wasn't capable of loving anyone. But with you, I realized it wasn't that I couldn't love. It was that I was scared of being loved back." She said she didn't respond right away. She just reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. For him, that was love. Not fireworks, not passion, not dramatic confessions. Just the peace of being seen and staying anyway. When an avoidant loves you, it might not look like the movies. It won't always be loud or overflowing or full of romantic words. But it will be steady, it will be real, and it will be earned. They'll show you love through presence, not promises. Through effort, not performance. Through quiet consistency, the kind that whispers, "You matter to me," even when I can't say it perfectly. And that's the kind of love that lasts. So if you're loving someone who's avoidant, or if you are the avoidant one, remember this. Love doesn't have to mean losing yourself, and vulnerability doesn't have to mean pain. Real love gives you space to stay who you are, while learning how to be seen. It doesn't rush you. It meets you where you are and grows from there. And over time, what once felt impossible, closeness, connection, trust, starts to feel natural. Because love, when it's real, isn't about breaking down walls. It's about building a door that opens slowly, carefully, and eventually, completely. When an avoidant loves you, they won't say it 1,000 times. They'll show it in their quiet, consistent, steady way. And when they do, you'll know they didn't just fall in love with you. They chose to, despite the fear, despite the risk, despite everything in them that once said, don't. And that choice, that brave, quiet, patient love, is one of the most beautiful kinds of love there is. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content on building healthy relationships, improving your self-esteem, and mastering your mental health. Thanks for watching. Remember, your journey back to you starts with a single step. Take it.